In other world news, U.S. Republicans are playing politics, and it's working. In the Senate, they blocked billions of dollars of aid to Ukraine in a vote on Wednesday to further negotiations on border policy changes, even as President Joe Biden signaled an openness to make compromises on the Mexican border. Democrats chastised the move.
If there's a word for what we most need now, it is to be serious. If Republicans in the Senate do not get serious very soon about a national security package, Vladimir Putin is going to walk right through Ukraine and right through Europe. This is a historic moment for the Senate. Are we going to do something about the threats to democracy happening around the world? Are we going to hold the line against autocrats and dictators and the enemies of our way of life?
For more on the story, our guest is Natia Seskuria, Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, joining us there from London. Thank you so much for being our guest on this topic today. Ms. Seskuria, can you tell us, is the support for the war, at least in the West, is it waning?
Thank you very much for having me, first of all. Well, I think we now see that there are definitely some problems when it comes to securing further support for Ukraine. There are many reasons why this is happening, and we see that Democrats are still very much united, but Republicans are not as united as we have seen them before. And this is due to the upcoming elections in 2024, as well as the fact itself that the war has been dragging on for so long, and we don't really see that any side has a strategic operational advantage at this point, creates some further tensions. The fact that the Senate has blocked the supplemental funding bill that included a substantial financial aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is an indication that there are definitely cracks when it comes to securing further funding for Ukraine. And in this case, the case of Ukraine is the most problematic one, because we have seen that when it comes to Israel support, for instance, there has been more unity even within the Republicans.
Is this also a measure of how many countries around the world are turning really more inward, or becoming more, not nationalist per se, but being more preoccupied with what's happening inside of their borders than outside?
Well, many current countries are very much preoccupied in terms of making sure politicians within many countries are preoccupied to make sure that they get enough votes next year. And we see that there are a lot of important elections coming up next year within the US, of course, and in Europe as well. That would be the primary goal of politicians, to secure the continuous support. And we also see the rise of disinformation that is very much in line with the Russian interests in terms of making sure that there are divisions within the European society and within the US society. And some questions are being asked whether or not it is sustainable to push forward further packages to sustain and support Ukraine's effort to fight against Russian aggression. I think it is very important, and Biden has highlighted that many times, to make sure that politicians in Europe and in the US make the public understand that this is not just Ukraine's effort. This is a war that will have fundamental impact on the future of democracy and future of Europe as well. And this is exactly what Vladimir Putin wants. And I think his expectation and what he's counting for is that in due course, the Western support will fade away and Ukraine will be left on its own against the Russian aggression.
Well, we're seeing his more kind of hardy appearances recently, where it's kind of he's coming out of his bunker, if you will, making more international appearances. Maybe that has already started this kind of "I told you so" attitude that he has, a feeling victorious even before the victory, at least in the long run.
Well, Putin is very, very far away from any sort of victory. But at the same time, he needs to be present. He needs to underline the fact that Russia still has some allies and Russia is still able to work with other countries other than European nations and the United States. It still has some allies and economic and trade relations with those countries that are not in line with the EU and Western efforts to pushing forward the sanctions against the Russian regime. And that is a very important image for Putin because there have been a lot of questions asked, even among the traditional Russian allies, whether or not Russia is still a reliable partner, because Russia has been very much weakened by the Western unity and Western efforts. However, the main question is that this is not enough to make sure that Ukraine comes out of this war victorious. And the main question is how much the West is willing to continue supporting Ukraine in a long-term perspective.
So from the West's perspective, can we say that Russia is stronger than the West believed it was in the end?
Well, I don't really think that the West had any sort of false optimistic overview that Russia would be defeated in a short-term perspective. I think it is very much obvious that Putin sees this war effort as a legacy-defining effort for himself, and he's very much committed because this is almost, I would say, that a case of his survival as a political leader within Russia. He needs at least some kind of victory in Ukraine. So it is very much obvious that despite all the failures that we have seen on the ground in Ukraine, and as well as some cracks within the political system that we have witnessed this summer, for instance, when Prigozhin undermined the regime, at least for a couple of weeks. But still, I think Putin is willing to continue this effort because it is very, very important for him that he takes at least some kind of victory to make sure that he remains in power in a long-term perspective.
Natia Seskuria, thank you so much for joining us live there from London. You are Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you so much for answering our questions.